We end the year a lot like the way we started, with controversial police-involved shootings where the cops are cleared and people protesting. Our panel of attorneys will take a look at what's been going on and what has become a pattern. Then for months, women, they've been accusing Bill Cosby of sexual assault. Now, today, the comedian facing charges for the first time. Will this open the door for many more? Also, if Peyton Manning decides to sue for defamation over that report saying he used performance-enhancing drugs, could that backfire on the star quarterback? We'll talk about defamation suits. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I am Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And as we do every Wednesday night, we take a look at legal issues. And as we wind down the year, we are seeing a rash of police shootings. And as usual, the commonality is police officer, minority, gun, and then a lot of questions. Of course, there is the case of 12-year-old Tamir Rice in Cleveland. A grand jury just refused to bring charges against the two officers involved in the fatal shooting. Prosecutors say they recommended that to the grand jury. Now, as we know, the kid, 12 years old, again, was playing with a toy gun when police rolled up and shot him just seconds later after exiting the vehicle. Then in Chicago, Officer Jason Van Dyke pleaded not guilty to murder in the shootings of 17-year-old Laquan McDonald. The dash cam shows video of McDonald walking away from the cops before he is shot 16 times. Police say he had a knife. The city didn't release the video until a year after the incident. Mayor Rahm Emanuel of Chicago says he thought releasing it would have jeopardized a federal probe of the case, but a judge forced the city to release said video last month. That spurred protests in the Windy City and over in Cleveland. Police, or people I should say, have been protesting about the Tamir Rice case ever since the grand jury ruled against charging the cops. All right, let's bring in the panel right now. Jim Kasuris. Jimmy's a criminal defense attorney in Manhattan. He sits on the board of directors of the New York City Criminal Bar Association, frequently lecturing at New York Law School and the bar associations in Queens and New York City. Mayo Bartlett, an attorney at the law offices of Mayo Bartlett PLLC and a former chief of the Bryce Crimes Unit at the Westchester County DA's office, very involved in civil rights cases. And we're also joined by Mark Furnish. He, of course, professor at Brooklyn Law. He's argued before the U.S. Supreme Court. Thank you guys for joining me, as always. Okay, we can talk about both cases out of Chicago and Cleveland, but let's, if we could start at least with Cleveland, which, again, you see the video clip. It seemed to me, Mayo, when I saw that, and we heard the surrounding facts, and let's just give a little bit more background to the case. Person calls into 911 and says they see somebody who they believe to be a juvenile and who they didn't think it was necessarily even a real gun. They tell that to the dispatcher. Dispatcher has the cops come on scene, never passes along that information, at least as we understand it right now. The officers roll up on the scene, and as people can see, within seconds, open fire on the kid with the toy gun. The officer who discharged his weapon, we now learn, was dismissed from a suburban Ohio police department because he did not handle crisis situations well and had anger management issues, among other things. Yet he was brought on the Cleveland police force, and there we are right now. I expected when I heard this case, and I knew certain other cases were tougher, but I thought this one, wait a minute. Somebody's getting at least indicted out of this thing. Were even you shocked that the prosecutor not only didn't get an indictment, but told the grand jury he didn't believe an indictment was warranted?
I'm at the point now where I'm no longer shocked by anything that happens in the criminal justice system. And I say that for a number of reasons, but one of which
and just to remind the audience, you worked in the DA's office yourself.
Absolutely. I was a prosecutor in the Westchester County DA's office for over 10 years. I started under Carl Vergari, and I worked for Janine Pirro for just about 8 or 9 years. And I can simply tell you that I've had the pleasure of working with a number of law enforcement officers who were extraordinary. In fact, the vast majority of the officers that I worked with would not have shot Tamir Rice or many of the other people who've been shot. They showed tremendous discretion and restraint. And there were circumstances where if they had shot, people would have said it was a justified shooting, but they showed the restraint and professionalism, and they were truly extraordinary people. No one got hurt. They didn't, and the person that ended up getting arrested didn't. What's troubling to me is the fact that if you have all of these cases, politics always creeps in. And when you start to get situations where the prosecutor feels that it's necessary to say that Tamir Rice had a size 12 shoe and that he was playing cops and robbers in the past and suggesting that that's justification for the shooting, it again begs the question that you need an independent prosecutor.
Well,
And before we even get to the
issue.
remedy, though, again for me, we get to the standard mark, and the one thing we've seen, whether it's in New York, whether it's in Missouri, whether it's in Cleveland, whether it's Chicago, I can keep going through the date lines. If an officer feels threatened, now, again, I always give the caveat, I'm in a temperature-controlled studio here and all the rest. However, we know the following. I said who who they put on the force, who they called to the scene, what they didn't share, and I know that speaks to a civil issue.
Right.
But for 5 minutes,
Well, not
they
necessarily.
left the kid lying in the snow. The sister ran. They took the time to handcuff her, but only when an FBI agent who happened to be around who came there. Only then did they even bother to administer CPR. So again, I'll just do a couple things, and I'm not trying to do it from whatever that Grisham book they turned into a movie is. Imagine the kid was white. I got a 12-year-old. In a million years, does anybody at this table think for a second if he was holding or she was holding a cap gun, he'd have a bunch of shots fired 3 seconds after he even got out of the car without even asking the kid to drop it?
At the Bundy Ranch, when you had predominantly white men pointing automatic weapons at federal agents, nobody got shot and nobody got arrested. So a lot of it comes down to, and I think that you bring up a great point, throw race out of it. Everybody who's watching this show, what would you expect law enforcement to do if your child was playing cops and robbers with a plastic gun?
I get it. And Mark, be agnostic here. You're the prosecutor in the case here. You have a choice on how to present to the grand
Well,
jury.
that's
Wasn't there
really-
enough to go after an indictment at least?
Well, you know, as you indicated, let's unpack what you said. There's a lot in there. You're talking about the standard to indict is a very low standard. It's a standard of probable cause. That's a different situation than the standard necessary to convict, which, as everybody knows from watching Law and Order, is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Negligence, an erroneous shooting, a wrongful shooting isn't necessarily a criminal shooting, but let's put that to one side. That's for a jury to decide. You said in the run-up to this that the dispatcher didn't relay critical information. That's a problem. Let's distinguish between what they failed to do after the shooting, which is leaving them there and not administering the proper first aid, leaving them possibly to freeze. That could be criminally negligent or criminally culpable in and of itself, even if the shooting wasn't. Put all that to one side. What is mind-boggling to me about this one, I mean, I can understand the decision of a grand jury not to indict. What I can't understand is why you would send a prosecutor into the grand jury that says don't indict. Now, as a lawyer, we have duties of candor to the tribunal, the fact finder, in this case to the grand jury. So if the prosecutor truly believes there's not enough evidence there to warrant an
Withdraw the
indictment,
case.
well, at a moral level and an ethical level, I sort of commend that. But why are you bringing it? Why are you going through the farce of putting it into the grand jury to begin with and issuing this 70-page CYA report when you have a prosecutor who's undermining that completely and saying don't indict? This is the kind of thing that infuriates people and causes people to question the system.
And you're right. And everything that Mark said, I agree with. But I come back to another analogy. I talked about if it was any one of our kids, okay? Please, okay? Secondarily, what if by accident it was a cop, standing out in the area, and he's shooting Nerf guns with his kid or whatever, okay? Somebody sees a guy standing out there. Do you imagine the different conversation we'd have today?
We'd be talking about the
If a neighbor
verdict.
came out and shot the guy because they felt threatened.
We'd be
and it was
talking
a
about
cop.
the verdict. We wouldn't even be talking about whether he would have been indicted. He would have been indicted within a week.
Well, not
There's-
necessarily, because we've had that happen, and we've had cases, and quite often you have cases where law enforcement officers are the victims of friendly fire from other law enforcement officers, whether they're undercover and on the job, or sometimes like in the Christopher Ridley case, which happened in White Plains, a Mount Vernon police officer who was
It's
trying
rare,
to...
though. It's
who was-
rare.
It's rare, however,
rare.
It's more rare that you will find a prosecutor who's willing to actually find criminal intent. And in that situation, it would be different because you'd have at least an adult who has a gun, as opposed to a child. So I'm concerned to get a carry permit and actually leave my house with a gun, because if someone simply
Yeah.
sees me
I
with
don't
that
wanna
gun,
go
I
there,
may
Mayo,
get shot.
But the big thing is people saw the Times today. They saw a story that I want your take on, which is you're seeing more cops charged in cases, but you're seeing no more convictions. And I'm not pleased before you send the mail in. I've been accused of a lot of things. It's interesting on this one. I've been called an apologist for the police a lot of times. Some people say I'm too hard. In this particular case, I'm looking through the prism of a parent. If it was your 12-year-old with a cap gun outside and somebody rolls up right in the middle of the park, there was no one around that was in any danger, and within 3 seconds shoots the kid without even asking the kid to drop the gun.
Well, we don't know
Now
if they
it's
asked
your
him to
child.
drop it or not. You can't
We know
decipher
within
that
less
from the
than
video.
3 seconds, Mark, it wasn't an attempt to control
We
the
also
situation.
don't know
But we
though, what
can't-
was said by the dispatcher.
We can't argue. This is my point. It's been my point. We don't know all of the facts.
That's right, we don't know.
Our point is, how can the public have any confidence in the system when you have the local prosecutor that's handling the case, and then in this situation, the unprecedented move of actually going into the grand jury
Well, I don't
and
understand
saying
that.
don't indict.
I don't
Have a
understand that.
special prosecutor. Have an
Yeah,
unbiased
but
person
we
presenting
have
the case.
cases now brought in Chicago. We have cases brought in Baltimore. I think this debate is not helpfully framed, A, in terms of race, B, in terms of all prosecutors can't do it. Some can do it, some can't do it. Each case should be looked at upon
But
its
Mark,
own
you
merits.
can't really do that, because
But they
who's
did.
gonna
But we don't
who's
live-
gonna make
but
the
that's to me-
determination?
but
You
to me,
can
Mark,
get-
you
An
can
ethical,
Mark,
ethical
Mark, but this
prosecutor, a
is-
scrupulous prosecutor will bring the charges.
But here's my only point. I hear what you're saying, but you always like to say we live in the real world. And in the real world, what are the images that are coming out?
That's right.
Maybe the cops are white, maybe the cops are black. Always the kid seems to be black, okay?
That's
And
what's covered in the press.
Well, no, Mark, but it's
that's
more
what's
than
covered
that,
in the press.
okay? We now have video. So people then see the video of what happens, and a pattern emerges. Fair, not fair. You want to debate what should or shouldn't have happened to the cops in Staten Island? We can debate this till the cows come home. But my only point is, there's a perception
Yes,
that
there's
the
a perception.
system, and I think it's more than a perception, is geared against the victim in many cases. And in this case, it was a 12-year-old with a cap
The
gun.
Times article rightly points out, and it's not an editorializing piece of article aside from the professor who's interviewed, police need, and I don't think anybody at this table or anywhere else will debate it, they need a wide strike zone and they need to be able to make mistakes,
Yep.
because if they don't have a wide strike zone, innocent people are going to get hurt.
how
That's why.
wide is the question?
Well, that's right. And the line between a screw up, a negligent thing, even a reckless thing, and a criminal conviction, that's a very important line to have drawn, because if they err on the side of holding back, you're going to get the hue and cry that you're getting now about the de Blasio administration, that crime is spiking up, and it's not
but if
working.
Whether
you
it's true or
have-
not, that's for another day.
But
Oh,
if
yeah.
you have an unbiased prosecutor,
Yes.
Mark, I agree with you. There are some prosecutors that are able, they are unbiased, but who's going to make
Well,
that
this is a
choice?
very
The
troubling-
public
this is a very
perception-
troubling thing.
The public
Today's is that
perception
the Cleveland thing is very
just
troubling.
They're losing trust
Well,
in
but
our
you also
system,
have to look,
and
why
it's gonna
is
have
it-
ramifications.
Why is it that
really is.
only Preet Bharara is able to bring charges against people in the corridor of corruption?
Oh, no,
How
no,
come
no,
our
that's
attorney?
a different
Why
discussion.
does
I
our,
don't think
well,
that's a-
I
I
don't
don't
think
think
so,
that's
and
an
I say
appropriate
this.
use of federal
I
power.
think that, well, but here's the question: is how
That
come,
gives rise to
how come the
selective
state attorney
prosecutions.
general's office has yet to do that? And again, it's too close to it. You're
Well,
dealing
that's
with
true.
people that you're too close to. That's why the federal government acts as the independent prosecutor.
I don't want a federal
Unfortunately,
government
guys,
being
the
the
three of us,
local law
we're
enforcement.
going to be talking
There's
about
no
this
general
story.
federal
We're going to be
police
talking
power.
about this in 2016.
That's right.
That's the only thing, unfortunately, we can be comfortable of. We're going to be talking about more training. We're going to be talking about all the rest
Wasn't
here.
that really the crux of the Times article, the lack of appropriate training for these people and the lack of funding with which to perform the
I
legal
happened
hope
in
training?
so.
Brooklyn.
I hope
Not
so.
for the prosecutor.
But there has to be a perception in communities that when there's a tragedy, whether it's just a mistake or not, if there wasn't discretion used, there should be some consequences. Okay, now, it's not just accusations anymore. Bill Cosby being charged with sexual assault. We're going to take a look at that case and what it could mean here for more that could be coming down the pipe.